Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on what time of day you're going to be listening to this discussion. We are going to be talking about the value and impact of our diversionary brief intervention program and why investing $425 into a youth on the front end is more advantageous than the average cost of locking up a youth, which is estimated to be about $588 a day, which equates to $214,620 per year per youth, according to a report that was done by the Justice and Policy Institute in 2020. I apologize in advance for the length of this video, but I wanted to address pertinent information, so please check the timestamps listed below to help you efficiently navigate relevant information for you. Let's begin first with what diversionary means and what it refers to. Diversionary programs gives a juvenile offender one chance to avoid a criminal record and conviction in exchange for a commitment to comply with a specific set of requirements by the court. Diversionary programs provide offenders with essential services to address underlying causes of criminal behavior, such as drug and alcohol abuse. Our online brief intervention is designed to solve problems for clients who are not yet involved in the criminal justice system, as well as those that are. Most teens, is what you need to know, are not considered medically addicted to drugs or alcohol, and oftentimes little attention has been paid to this large group of adolescents who use drugs experimentally but are not yet dependent, who could successfully reduce their drug use through early intervention. Why this is key is because the reporting rates of recreational usage since COVID-19 with regards to placement is considered low. Yet there are certain variables that our agency addresses that appears to be slightly overlooked or simply neglected, such as less detainment and less arrest doesn't necessarily mean that youth are not using or experimenting at higher levels. Due to the stressful nature of COVID-19 alone, the nation is making continuous amendments to policies regarding the use of marijuana. There are so many uncertainties of how these types of reforms will unfold for our youth over the next several years, let alone decades, particularly those in impoverished communities of color. The country is experiencing less direct interaction, and this is key. There are more online learnings, more confinement due to certain quarantine restrictions, and youth are being inundated and constrained on social media platforms, which has created a different form of isolation and seclusion and a new custom to inaccessibility. Youth are not getting into trouble with their peers at the same way prior to the shift in arrest or detainment prior to COVID-19 and in the past several years. During the lockdown stage, people were staying at home throughout this pandemic, and lockdown doesn't, again, necessarily mean they have stopped getting high. In fact, young people are being emboldened to use marijuana by the media having campaigns that have joint for jab. There are numerous places all over the country where marijuana is promoted, it's licensed, it's legalized. And with that being said, young people are still dealing with high levels of peer pressure, high levels of poverty, death, murder, and depression, and they're fighting suicide. Helping them navigate their impulsivity, how to deal with short-term and long-term consequences for self-medicating are vital components that must be considered without getting too explicit. This disruption has escalated into extreme dysfunctional family dynamics with our clients. Here is what you need to know. The majority of juveniles are not afforded the opportunity to obtain preventative services for drug and alcohol without first being referred by a criminal justice system. It can be extremely frustrating when parents are seeking out professional resources and services in their community in order to prevent their child from, number one, juvenile detention, probation, or long-term incarceration. They want help before their child gets in trouble with the law or even in school where they're expelled. Our diversionary program is designed to assist parents, teachers, social workers, therapists, probation officers, and juvenile courts in identifying youth who can be safely diverted from further contact with the juvenile justice system, which allows brief intervention services to anyone with or without a detainment referral. Sidebar. This is essential because adequate preventative services are often unavailable to disenfranchised communities of color unless they have been detained based on a drug and alcohol-related crime. The mindset is, let's get these kids help after they get into trouble. But what happens to the client that has never been in trouble, has never been arrested, has never been detained by the law? The ones that slip through the crack, that aren't identified until there's an addiction. There are many clients who are in desperate need but can't afford it due to the financial means. So what I am doing is I am welcoming sponsorship to anyone willing to donate to support the work we do on our Never Do Business Hungry Patreon page that will be coming soon, that will be given access to exclusive content, and why this labor of love is vital to us, because there is a value in our services, because we redirect youth away from unnecessary involvement with the juvenile justice system and provide youth have problems with behavioral issues. We utilize a one-to-one therapy for our youth with mild to moderate substance use, which is the MIT, which is the motivational interviewing, and the CBT, which is the cognitive behavioral therapy. These are evidence-based practices along with the extensive expertise that I've operated in with therapeutic mentoring model that has been established with servicing over 35,000 court-ordered clients on juvenile probation for 10 consecutive years at 3 juvenile probation facilities. We've serviced clients on probation, off probation, and individuals who have never been on probation, and those without a substance dependency diagnosis or Rule 25 assessment to their treatment. Our agency's impact is substantiated with outcomes and measurements. I was previously known as Humble Beginnings, Inc., and I am certified to administer brief intervention by Dr. Ken Winters at the University of Minnesota, where brief intervention model was created. Our agency at one point did a division of his 4-part session into a 2-part home community session, and we modified this evidence-based practices, which was authorized directly by Dr. Ken Winters in our training. These modifications were beneficial for disenfranchised populations that were reluctant to engage in what appeared to be either too bureaucratic of a process or an invasion of privacy. Here's what happens when direct services were provided for the 4-part sessions that were divided into 2 sessions for the home that allowed us to tailor those sessions to meet the client's needs. Visits that were directly done either in their home, coffee shops, schools, and community service locations. And even though that's not happening now and it's done directly online, those strategic variations designed by our agency allowed us to administer those CBT forms and that interviewing, along with the mental health data collection sheets that were devised exclusively for our agency by the Wilder Foundation. That particular niche has the same functionality and the same techniques online. What that means is that our arrangement of those evidence-based worksheets and our sessions trained by our BI specialists continues to effectively have more comprehensive approach to providing culturally specific services. With that being said, the implementation of these modifications for brief intervention along with those therapeutic mentoring program gave our agency an 80% reduction in recidivism rates for 10 consecutive years, as well as 90% completion rate in all direct services through Hennepin County Juvenile Probation. In addition, there is extensive data that was collected from those fact sheets that were developed by the Wilder Foundation for our agency, Humble Beginnings, Inc., for brief intervention from their findings of the 2015 summary report for the DCCOR, which is the Department of Community Correction. We were also a recipient of the Hennepin County Attorney's Office Community Leadership Award in November 2010. Now that I've given you a little background of our decades of working directly with families and children, let me answer some of the typical questions that parents have when going through this process. The first one is, what is a PESQ? The PESQ is the Personal Experience Screening Questionnaire. It provides a quick way to screen adolescents for substance use. The PESQ is the primary tool that determines the eligibility, and sometimes the kids, based on how they answer the question, it can be over-reported or under-reported. There are times when there's overrides given, and we'll discuss that further when we meet. As parents, what can they expect during this process of the brief intervention session? The intake is the first procedure, which is the PESQ. The brief intervention is explained in detail. It is now required that you just listen to this video, because that's what I'm doing. I'm explaining it in detail. Once it's being administered, and as that has been completed, you go on to a form which was designed by our agency, which is a BI consent form. And this establishes proper protocol guidelines required on the camera for session. Clients must be properly dressed, fully dressed. No siblings, no friends, no advocates, no parents are ever allowed to see, to engage, or participate in or with any sessions with regards to the client. Parents can ask questions after the BI specialist has completed their private session with the clients. All sessions, here's what you need to know, and I want to stress and emphasize, are pre-scheduled, and they're private, and they're separate. Note, they have a set date. They will be determined during this intake process before moving forward. Clients are never allowed the course materials or prior to the set scheduled session. They can't skip ahead, nor can anyone else have access to session materials or private sessions. These stipulations are criterions that have to be followed. They are non-negotiable. Also, no downloading of documents, printing or copying, or sharing any confidential information with others. Any inappropriate conduct, foul language, verbal abuse, acts of violence will result in immediate dismissal of the BI process. Please note and take into consideration, BIs are not refundable. And here's a heads up, our agency is mandated to report unsafe behavior to the proper authorities, such as child protection or other local police departments. So let me reiterate, again, all sessions are pre-scheduled, private, separate. Remember, we have to have a set date. Will be determined during that process, the intake process. Parents are required to leave the room to ensure privacy of the client and the BI specialist, providing the autonomy and the confidentiality. The BI specialist will then go over the concerns, the objectives, the goals, and any potential consequences of continuous usage. The client has to complete the EB evidence-based worksheets, private sessions on the same scheduled date of the 4-part sessions. Here's what I mean when I say that. Clients are schedules the first session with the BI specialist, and let's say they schedule the session Wednesday, March 2nd, 2022 at 12:30 in the afternoon Central Standard Time. The second session has to have a minimum of 7 days, up to 14 days before the next session starts. What that means is that the BIs cannot be done BI should be done on the following Wednesday on an agreed upon time and not before. So that means that session 2 would be on March 9th, 2022, nor can it exceed beyond March 16th, 2022 for that second session. So what does that tell you? You cannot schedule a session on March 8th, March 6th, and March 5th because it has to be 7 days. And based on goals and objectives, it could be up to 14 days, meaning March 16th. It could be some special stipulations given by the court if a client is on probation. So those are things to consider, but it cannot exceed 14 days in session. And then the third session will be scheduled the following week, and the fourth session the following week. And those preset methods will happen. And what that looks like then is that the client then finishes all 4 sessions by March 30th, 2022. So you might need to go back and listen and listen to what I said so that you get a clearer understanding. What that time commitment is involved for that particular youth for brief intervention, that's a question that's often asked. Here again, there is the intake process, and that intake process has a 72-hour referral rate process. So that referral rate, that means within 3 days, we're getting back to you and setting up a time to start the BIs. And that referral rate, referral session process time is whether you have been referred through the courts, whether you're doing it directly, whether it's online, and whether you're under contractual obligation. The PESQ is completed, then the consent forms are signed, and then this is when the clock starts. So the 3 days is not included in the maximum time, because the client has a minimum of 30 days to 45 days to complete the entire process. The average total time commitment with the BI specialist can range from 30 to 90 minutes per session. That means 30 minutes to an hour and a half per session, depending on the complexities or the requirements. I tend to not like to go beyond 90 minutes because of the retainment of young people and getting them focused. So their adjustments can be made. The average time spent is between 3.5 to 4.5 hours for the sessions entirely. As a recap, in order to adhere to set guidelines and standards set by the Office of Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention, OJJDP, and the U.S. Department of Justice, which is the U.S. Department of Justice as a component of the office of that program, and the requirements for evidence-based worksheets and sessions that were set by Dr. Ken Winters. Those 4 sessions are finalized by 30 days, again, in a maximum of 45 days. Here's some next typical questions. What if my child is ordered to do community service hours? I get that, and I also get that parents want their kids to do community service hours. There's a different set of requirements when it's court ordered as opposed to a parent asking for their child to participate in the process. Our role in that process is that in order to be in compliance, there are additional administrative forms that will be given. If there is a court order situation, the probation officer will be given a disposition contract, a DCA, and a CSVR, which is a community service verification record. And that form will provide to the probation to substantiate the community service hours. That signed form is going to be signed by an administrative person to validate if that client did those community service hours. So say the judge says that child has to do 20 hours of community service. They then can go into their local business, local library, wherever they can access community service hours. Some type of recreational facility. I know it's kind of limited and kind of restricted during the COVID-19, but there are things in which you can modify. But whatever the case may be, when doing those community service hours, even cleaning up, volunteering, it has to be signed off by an administrator. And then at the end, there is a discharge, a DSR report that is submitted to the agency for appropriate jurisdictions. So here's what you need to know. I want to point out that those are the only administrative forms that are given to others. Then there's a consent to do that. There, as far as the sessions and all the worksheets and things that we've done, we do privately with clients. That is not given to anyone. And once those, the last question is how long, what happens once the child is completed? Once everything is followed, course materials are finalized, sessions have been concluded, a certification of completion will be given to the client. So in closing, I just want to point out the last thing, which is billing. and the billing invoice and structure. This brief intervention process is $425. There's no exception. The total cost for BI is $425. $25 is for the PESQ and $100 is per session. What I am doing right now is exploring feasible and affordable options for my clients with this new platform and payment structure and other platforms where the services are provided. There's not flexibility for payment for those under contractual agreement. Gumroad will give clients the opportunity to pay for each session weekly, and after each week is fully completed, meaning the sheets are done, and on that same day you've met with the brief intervention specialist and you completed session 1, and then and only then can you proceed and pay for session 2, and the following 7 days then you follow the same process. You finish session 1 and finish session 2, and you can keep paying as you go. Remember that you are not allowed to skip ahead, nor can you just purchase one session. There is an obligation for all 4 sessions. Paying weekly on this platform offers sessions that have been scheduled or completed will allow clients more flexibility. It is like your paying as you go method. So you pay for this PESQ, which is $25 again, and then you pay the $100 for session 1, $100 for session 2, and $100 for session 3. You get my drift. There are no exceptions. Again, there are no refunds for the $425 fee due to the extensiveness of brief intervention. And once that clock starts ticking, if there is agreed upon delay in completion, meaning you purchased the service and was delayed in getting started, we will give you the opportunity to complete all 4 sessions. This is not assumed by the purchaser of this service. This will be approved by our agency directly. So that's something that we can work out directly. If you have any further questions, please leave a message on this platform and I'll get back to you as soon as possible, because other platforms that have Never Do Business Hungry Teachable have different obligations. Again, I'm in the process, just so you know, FYI, to updating some of the modifications where those platforms that provide that services, so that they can have some congruency. But just so that you know, in order for me to get back to you with clarity on this process and allowing you to have a more flexibility, this is what's offered on this platform. And I am honored and I want to thank you, and first of all say thank you in advance, and I'm honored to and looking forward to working with you and your family. So take care and be blessed. Thanks.